Okay, so just one quick comment. I sometimes forget to upload the problems, even though I have listed them down locally. I sometimes forget to upload them, so just like I forgot to upload them on Wednesday, uh, I usually try to do it immediately after the class, but sometimes I forget. So if I do forget, please remind me. Okay, so I'll do that today, and this is especially important for the weekend because if I forget to do it on Friday, then you don't have enough time to prepare for Tuesday's quiz. Okay, so where was I? So I had introduced I had started to introduce the formalism of probability theory. So we introduced this notion of experiments, outcomes, events, uh, and using the formalism of set theory, we said some elementary things, and we defined this notion of sigma algebra on which events will be defined, and uh, and we defined the formally the notion of a probability function or a probability measure. Okay, and I gave some examples. So somebody asked very valid question. So for a finite sample space, an example of a sigma algebra S which is not 2 to the s. So here's an example. So you take s equal to 1 to 3, and you take f to be you have to have the empty set, and you take the set 1 and the set 2 3 and s itself. Okay, so let's see all the axioms for f. So what are the axioms? The empty set should be there in f. Here it is. For any collection of events, their union should be there. So take anything, the union of these two guys is the whole set, and for the others the union is trivial. And for every set, its complement should be there. So if the only non-trivial example here is the set 1, 2, 3. Okay. So this is an example of a very much finite sample space with a non-trivial sigma algebra. Yeah, but let me tell you also, for those who are interested, there's a general mechanism to construct sigma algebras. You take any collection of subsets whatsoever. Okay, just take whatever the hell you like, and then use these axioms and start adding things. Start adding unions. Start adding their complements. Then their unions, their complements, etc. Keep going, and at some point you will not be able to do anything else, and you will get something. In some cases you will get 2 to the s, but in some other cases you will get something smaller. So I constructed this by starting with the element 1, the singleton 1, taking unions with phi 1 and s does not give me anything non-trivial. Taking complements gives me this, and now taking unions and complements, I'm done. I mean, I don't get anything else. Okay, so this is one way of constructing. Okay, so now let's talk about properties of the probability function. So here's a lemma. P satisfies the following properties. These are all elementary, but it's good to write all of these down formally. So So suppose, yeah, okay, let me write it. So suppose E and F are events. Then the first one is that the probability of E complement, E is an event, which means it lives in the sigma algebra. So by definition, or by definition of the sigma algebra, E complement also belongs there. So we should be able to make sense of this guy. And this is, as you can imagine, 1 minus P of E. So E complement, remember, was the event that E did not occur. So if the probability of E complement should naturally be 1 minus the probability of E, and this is something that we will show in a second. If E is a subset of F, this is the notion for a subset, which means that E could be equal to F. This thing over here means that. Then P of F is equal to P of E plus P of F minus E, and this is necessarily greater than or equal to P of E. P of E union F, the third property, if I take the union, then this is P of E plus P of F minus P of E intersection F, which is EF. Okay, let me use the notation I have said. So this is EF. And the last property is a little longer. So suppose, so if E1 up to En are events, then the probability of their union, E1 union, etc., En, is the sum over I equals 1 to n P of Ei minus the sum over I and j from 1 to n, where I is less than j, of P, the probability of Ei Ej, which means intersection, remember, plus, let me write it here, plus the sum 1 less than or equal to I less than j less than k less than or equal to n. So sum over three things, probability of Ei, Ej, k, etc. You go all this way. So you go on this way. So first you took singletons, then you took pairs, then you took triplets, and each time you alternate the sign, so plus etc. And the last term is when you take all n of them. So this comes with the sign minus 1 to the n. So the sign depends on the parity of n, and this is just probability of E1 up to En. Okay, this is a reformulation of what principle? Does anybody know?
The principle of inclusion and exclusion.
That's it. Inclusion, exclusion. So remember that our probability axiom, so I'll just go back to it in a second. But these are the four properties that I'm going to prove now. Okay?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Should it be minus 1 raised to n minus 1?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you. Oops. Yes, thank you. Right. Well spotted. Okay. So now let me go back. Oops. Let me go back to this properties of the probability function. So what do we have? We have that the empty set has 0 probability, and the sample space, entire sample space, has probability 1. And if you have a bunch of mutually exclusive events, that means their intersection is empty. then their union has probability equal to their sum. Right? This is all that we are given. These are all natural things, but we have to prove them. Okay. So they should start with the axioms. So I will prove some of them and I will leave some of them as exercises. Right? So let us go slowly. So let me prove this. So or maybe let me ask you to prove this. So remember, let me recall the Venn diagram. So here is our sample space S and here is E sitting over here. So probability of E is something, and I want to prove that the probability of E complement, which is the remainder, is 1 minus the probability of E. How do I do that? From these axioms alone. Anybody?
So because E and E complement are mutually disjoint sets, and because their union is equal to the entire sample space, so probably
yeah, exactly. So note here that E and E complement are mutually exclusive. Their intersection is empty by definition. And so probability of E union E complement by the second axiom is equal to probability of E plus probability of E complement. But this is equal to E union E complement by the definition again is S, and this is equal to 1 by the first property. Okay, so then you get this. Okay. Okay, so what does part B say? So it says that if E is a subset of F, then P of F is P of E plus P of F minus E. So the idea here is very similar. And the Venn diagram should tell you. So here is my big F, and here is E sitting inside it. And you know the relationship between these two is similar. So again the idea is that E and F minus E are mutually exclusive. And so I get the same thing. So P of E, by the way, F minus E is the same as F intersection E complement. Okay, so this is something that is useful to keep in mind. And these are mutually exclusive, again by definition. So their union is F. So P of F is P of E plus P of F minus E. So straightforward. And as for the inequality, so why does the inequality hold? So we get P of F is P of E plus P of F minus E. Now why does this inequality hold? Why is probability of F greater than or equal to probability of E? Anybody?
So once we prove that probability of F is equals to probability of E plus probability of F minus E,
Yes.
and probability function lies between 0 and 1, then this has to be greater than probability of E.
Why? You just stated everything that you need, but what's the argument? It's between 0 and 1. So what is the specific point you need?
So it's just the
probability of this positive.
Probability of F minus E is greater than 0.
The greater than or equal to 0. Yes, that's right. Yes, that's what you need. So as Aryan said correctly, probabilities lie between 0 and 1, both inclusive. So to conclude the inequality, you have to focus on this guy. This guy is greater than or equal to 0. So probability of F is probability of E plus something non-negative. So it's always greater than probability P. So this proves the second thing. Okay, now what's the third thing? Again, so here for the third thing, there's a useful notation. So notation. This stands for union, that you all know, and this symbol or union with a dot stands for what is called disjoint union. So this means, so when I say A disjoint union B, that means assumes that A and B are disjoint. That means mutually exclusive. That means A, B is empty. Okay, two sets are set. So this mutually exclusive phrase is equivalently written as disjoint. I mean, the phrase mutually exclusive is more used in probability theory, but when you say two sets are disjoint, that means their intersection is empty. Okay, so here, so for part, oh sorry, where am I? Yeah, so I'm trying to prove this probability of E union F. So again, I draw my Venn diagram. So here is E, and here is, let me write it inside. Oh no, let me write it outside. So this is E and this is F. So write E union F as E minus F disjoint union E intersection F disjoint union F minus F. So this is E minus F, this is, oh god, E intersection F, and this is F minus F. And these are disjoint unions. So now you take their probabilities. So probability of E union F is probability of E minus F plus probability of E intersection F, which is EF, plus probability of F minus E. Now, by definition, E minus F sits inside E, is a subset of E. So using part B, this is E, LHS is equal to probability of so I want to write probability of E minus F as the probability of E minus E minus F, but E minus F is E intersection F. So this is probability of E minus probability of EF plus probability of EF, and the same argument over there. So probability of F minus probability. By the way, just to be clear, I use this slanted line to denote set difference, and sleeping line, as they say in school nowadays, for the regular minus. Okay, so E minus F is E. I mean, the probability of E minus F is probability of E minus probability of E intersection F, as you can see clearly from this one. If there are any questions, please ask. Okay, so this is what we wanted to prove. Right. So we wanted to prove that probability of E intersection F is probability E plus probability of F minus probability of F. That's what we have. Okay, the last thing I will leave as an exercise. So generalize C. So exercise. Generalize the proof of C using induction. Okay, it's tedious, and I mean, you probably have seen some version of this anyway. So I think all of you can do this. Okay, so so let's look at one infinite example.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
How can we prove that the probability of any event which is neither empty nor the sample space itself is between 0 and 1 necessarily?
No, there's nothing to prove. This is the assumption. Probability is a function from the sigma algebra to close 0, 1. So to every event you will assign a number in between 0 and 1.
Yes, sir, but how do we know that it is neither 0 nor 1?
We don't know that. Okay, so good. So you bring me to my next remark or definition. Or maybe let me give this example first, and then I'll answer your question. Yeah. So that is not true. What you assume to be true is actually not true, and I'll give you an example in a second. So before that, let me give an infinite example. So let us take S to be so okay. So let me give you the experiment first. So toss a fair coin repeatedly. Until the first head. Okay, so you keep tossing the coin until you get heads. The first H length. Okay, so what is the sample space here? Can someone start me off? So give me some element of this sample space. What is a possible outcome?
Head,
Head,
tail, head,
tail,
head,
etc. Yes, tail, head, etc. T cubed H. So it's an infinite. So cardinality of S is infinite. Right? So you can have any number of tails in principle before you get a head. Right? Okay. Now, what are probabilities? So what is probability of t to the n minus 1 h? Let's say. What is the probability? So for those of you who care about who are pedantic, I'm not going to describe the sigma algebra. Okay. Actually, in this case, it's okay to take 2 to the s. But yeah. Yes, Kennel?
It's 1 minus half to the power n.
1 minus half to the power n. But you know what 1 minus half is, no? Oh, you're saying 1 minus half power n.
Yeah, like
No,
this.
that is wrong. That is not correct.
1 by 2 to the power n.
That's right, yeah, 1 by 2 power. It's just, I mean, it's the complement of what you were saying. Because it's a fair coin. I have said what fair coin is. Fair coin means both heads and tails are equally likely. So there are a total of n coin tosses here. Tails occurs n minus 1 times, and then a heads occurs. So there are n coin tosses. Each has probability of. So this is 1 by 2. Okay. And let's check. So check that sigma probability of t power n minus 1 h n equals 1 to infinity. Oops, sorry. This is 1. Okay, I leave it as an exercise. Let me not do this. This is just a geometric system. Okay, so it makes sense. Okay, so now let me ask, I think, the question that Soham had raised. So before that, let me give a definition. Actually, this should answer the question. So an event E is called a null event if probability of E is 0. And an almost sure event if probability of E equals 1. So the very fact that we are defining such a thing should answer the question, but let me be absolutely explicit. So this is a warning. Remember, the empty set is the impossible event. Null events need not be impossible. In other words, there are events, non-trivial events, non-empty events, if you like, whose probability is 0. And let me give you an example of that. Toss a fair coin. Infinitely often. So this is the experiment. So then S is infinite binary words, if you like. So tails and heads. If I represent tails by 0, heads by 1, then these are binary words. So one compact way of writing this is 2 to the n. So this is just 0, 1 to the n, which means infinite, or let's say t comma h to the n. So infinite strings of t and h. Okay, this is a very rich example. It's not at all trivial. So this is a fair coin, remember? So both are equally likely. And now here's what is probability of all heads. What is this probability? What do you think?
0.
0. Right? Because I mean, this, your intuition tells you this, that you know it's not possible to keep getting heads infinitely often. Okay. You know, so the situation is even worse. I mean, take any possible string that you like. So, moreover, for any sequence of h's and t's, you know, I take probably any sequence that you like. So h, t, t, h, h, whatever you like, you know, you will get 0. So this is this should motivate why we need to talk about events rather than outcomes. So the probability of any single outcome is 0. No, isn't that? Do you see that? So this should, you know, raise some questions for you. I mean, then how the hell do we deal with anything? Every single thing has probability 0. Right? So what do we do? What do we do? Yes, Kenneth? Still have a question?
Sir, then how they sum up to 1?
Right. Well, of course they sum up to 1. No, it's a fair coin. So let me give you a non-trivial event. So non-trivial event. E is the event that the first coin lands H. So then what is P of E? Yes, Kenneth?
It's still, it's
It's a fair coin, remember.
it should be half.
Yeah, it is half. Because your first coin can be either heads or tails. I'm not asking you. If my event doesn't care about all the rest of the world, I only care about the first coin toss. You know, it's lands heads, it's half. So this which is certainly greater than 0. Right? So this event makes sense and it has a nice probability. So here I am completely washing the sigma algebra under the rug, because, and you know, this is why I cannot take the sigma algebra to be 2 to the s. Because then everything is stupid. I get zeros everywhere. Okay. So this is a good example to keep in mind. Okay. By the way, here I should have mentioned. So if I call, okay. So if I set En to be the event, I should have done this before, the singleton event t to the n minus 1h. This is a union of so this is equal to probability of En, and this thing is equal to the probability of union n equals 1 to infinity. Okay, so it's an example of a infinite union, non-trivial example. Okay. And union of En, of course, is all of S. So P of S. Okay, so I should have written that. Okay. All right. So now let us go to equally likely outcomes. So for many finite examples, finite sample spaces, I mean, so in many cases of finite S, it is natural to take f to be 2 to the s and assume every outcome as equally likely. Right? So we've already seen two examples, coin toss, fair coin toss, and die throw. But many more examples are there, and we'll see some examples in a second. So thus, if S equals 1 up through n, then we have P of I, which I will write P of I instead of P of the singleton set I. This is 1 by n for all I in S. Right? And then for every E in F, which means any subset E of S, it's probable. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry, messing up notation. Probability. This P should be replaced by this P. Probability of E is just a cardinality of E phi. Right? Because this is the finite set, there are finitely many elements. So whatever the elements, you can write the set as a disjoint union of singletons. And, okay. So this kind
So
of, yes.
have we defined this to be so, or are we going to prove this?
No, this is obvious, no? Because E is a union of its outcomes, disjoint union.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's obvious. Oh, let me see. There. Okay. So here is a general counting principle that is useful to keep in mind. I mean, these things are kind of obvious, but if we state it for completeness, then it's there. So if our experiments are performed, such that let's say the first has n1 outcomes, and for each of these the second has n2 outcomes, and for each of these, let me just do one more. Third has in 3 outcomes, and for each of these, and so on, until n r outcomes of the last one, or for the last one, rather, last experiment. Then there are n1 times n2 times etc. times nr outcomes. The key point here, of course, is that that the number of outcomes of the second should not depend on which outcome came in the first. Right? So we should have the same number. Only then this makes sense. Okay, so let's do an example. So probability is full of such examples. Okay, so let's say an urn just means like a big bottle, but urn is a common terminology in such examples. An urn contains 6 white and 5 black balls. Okay. Okay, so 2 balls are randomly drawn without replacement. So these are keywords that are often used, and I will stress them in a moment. Find the probability that one is white and one is black. Okay, so is the question clear? Okay, so let me emphasize this word, this phrase, without replacement means you take whatever ball you picked out of the urn and you keep it aside. You do not put it back into the urn. If you say with replacement, that means you take a ball, look at it, note it down, and put it back. Okay? Is the question clear? So there are 2 experiments happening here. Right? So you draw a ball, keep it aside, draw another ball. Okay? And here is where this counting principle applies. So what is the total number of outcomes?
So 4.
Huh? What? No. No. 4. No. What is the total number of outcomes? Oh, I see, that way. No. I see what you mean, but no. Right, so we should be careful. So, so how many total balls are there? Okay, so let's do this here. So total number of balls is 11. Okay. So in the first experiment has 11 outcomes. You are going to pick a ball. There are 11 ways of doing that, right? I see what you are saying, but it is true that the white balls are indistinguishable and the black balls are indistinguishable, but there are 11 balls, and so you could pick any one of those 11. Okay, so the first experiment has 11 outcomes, and regardless of what you picked, black or white, the second experiment has 10 outcomes, because then there are 10 balls left. Implies the total number of outcomes by the counting principle is 11 times 10, which is 100. Okay, so that's going to be the denominator of our probabilities. So there are so many ways of doing things. Okay, now we want to see the probability that one is white and one is black. So here there are two possibilities. So let's say first I'll write capital W for white, and second capital B for black. So how many ways can this happen? Someone wants to answer? The first white can happen. Yes?
6 into 5.
6 into 5. Yes, right. Whoever said that, you can't make out. So first white can be done in 6 ways. Now the white has been picked. Now there are 5 white and 5 black balls in the second outcome, and for the second there are 5 black balls. So this is 30. The second possibility is first black, second white. In this case, you pick the first black ball again in 5 ways and the second white ball in 6 ways. So this again gives you 30. Right. So the total probability is 30 plus 30 by 110, which is 60 by 110, which is 6 by 1. Okay, this is an example of an application of the counting principle. So you count all possible outcomes. That's what you do first. That gives you the denominator. And then you count all the outcomes that belong to your event of interest, which is in this case the event that one is white and one is black. Okay. Are there any questions about this example? Okay, so since there are no questions, let me warn you of something that I did implicitly, and that is something that we will do all the time. I did not tell you, so in the above example, I did not tell you what is the sigma algebra. Did I say anything about the sigma algebra here? Did I say anything about the probability function here? I did not say anything. So you could have questioned me, I mean, how do you get this answer? Right? I mean, that would be a valid question. Nobody asked it. Right? So we did not make any assumption on the sigma algebra. We apparently did not make any assumption on the probability function. So here is the general problem. F and P are not typically stated. For such problems. Okay? But I did say something. I said randomly drawn. Let me use another color. I did say randomly drawn. So randomly drawn means that each, or not that it means, but it should be taken to mean that each ball is equally likely to be drawn at any point of time. Okay? So in practice, make the most natural assumptions. Okay? Which is what? What is the most natural assumption? The most natural assumption is that each ball is equally likely to be drawn. If you have I claim any other assumption, any other probability function that you take is not so natural. I mean, you could have said the fifth white ball has probability 3 over 5 and all the others are uniform among the 2 by 5. That I think is not a natural assumption. I mean, why would you make such an assumption? I did not say anything like that in the problem. You could also have made the assumption that all the white balls have different probabilities than the black balls. Again, that's not something that is natural, because I mean, if such a thing were true, I would have said it. The fact that I have not said any such thing in the problem statement implies that all things are equally likely. And this is the assumption that you should make. And this is also for all the questions, quizzes, homeworks, etc., exams. You should make the most natural assumptions. Okay? Don't come back and tell me that you did not define the sigma algebra. Okay? And you did not define the probability function. If it's not stated, you make the most natural assumption. Okay? Is that clear? I mean, this should be absolutely something that you should keep in mind for your grades. I mean, this is not something that is for your learning so much as for your grading, right? So we will, if you make unnatural assumptions, we will deduct those. Okay. Okay. For the next example, I'll set the following notation. Again, this is maybe common for many of you, but again, so the notation n with an exclamation mark means n factorial. This is n times n minus 1, etc., up to 2 times 1. This is to be read as n factorial. Do not use any other funny notation. I mean, if I have seen previously people use things like this, I mean, all this is not okay. I will not accept this. We will use standard notation for standard things. Okay. Some of the notation that you learned in school, maybe you learned some other funny notations. I mean, they are not something that I have seen and I will not accept. Okay. So here is another example. So the rest of the class I will just do examples. Okay. Okay. Let me. Since I'm running out of time and I want to do the birthday paradox, let me go skip one example that I had in mind. Okay, so here is the ISC, a question about the ISC math department, and something that annoys me very frequently. So ISC math department has 29 male and 3 female faculty. And this is a fact. You can check it. So it turns out that for some reason a committee of 5 people is to be formed. If the selection is random, and again you should understand what random means, what is the probability that there is one woman? On the committee. So you can guess why this question annoys me. I sit on way too many committees. Okay, so what do we do? So again, is the question, is it clear what I mean by random? It means any 5 people are equally likely to be selected, right? That's the natural assumption here. It's not natural to assume that women are more likely to be selected or men are more likely to be selected, because it's not stated. In practice, it may be true. For the problem statement, for the problem, it is not stated. Okay, so to answer this, another notation. The number of ways of choosing R objects out of n is n factorial divided by r factorial n minus r factorial, which is given by this notation. N, I mean, it's like a matrix of size 2, n and r, and it's to be read as n choose r. Again, this is standard notation. In your school, you might have had other notations, NCR or whatever. I mean, that's not standard. Maybe a few times I will forgive it because you guys might be used to it, but we will only use this notation. Okay. All right. So now let's see. So what is the total number of outcomes? So let's come back to our problem. There are 29 male and 3 female faculty, and you have to form a committee of 5 people. So what is the total number of outcomes? Yes?
So it would be 32 choose 5.
That's correct. So there are total of 32 people, 29 plus 3. And so the total number of outcomes is choosing 32 out of 5, which is 32 factorial by 5 factorial, 28 factorial. Okay. And now how many ways can we satisfy our event of interest? So the number of ways of having one woman on the committee. By that I mean, again, exactly one woman. I'm not saying that, okay, so again, this might lead to confusion. I mean exactly one woman. You might say if there are 2 women on the committee, then also there's one woman on it. But I'm now talking about exactly one. So what is this? How do you do this?
So 3 choose 1.
No, that's not right.
So I mean, choosing one woman out of 3, it can be done in 3 choose 1 ways, and then choosing the remaining 2 out of the males, it can be done in 29 choose 2 ways. So we multiply them because they're independent.
Not 2. We don't want 3 members in our committee. We want 5 members. So you're almost right, but so you have to choose one woman out of 3 and 4 out of 29. Right? We have to form a committee of 5. So this can be done in 29 choose 4 times 3 choose 1. So the probability, so the required probability is equal to 29 choose 4 times 3 choose 1 divided by 32 choose 1. So let me not do the calculation, but I leave you to check that this is 27 times 26 times 5 times 3 divided by 32 times 31 times 30. Whatever it is. I mean, I don't care for the actual. Okay, so the last example is this famous birthday paradox. So there are n people in a room. Find the probability that no 2 share the same birthday. Okay, so what's the, before we answer this question, no leap years, assume that there are no leap years. Okay, just for simplicity. So what's the assumption here? I have not stated any particular assumption, but there is one assumption. Yes, sir.
We are assuming that people are equally likely to born on any day.
That's right. Yes, Vedant is correct. So every day, so maybe I'll say that assumption. Every birthday is equally likely. This is not true in practice. When I say not true, I mean, let's take population of India. It's not true that the birthdays are equally likely. In fact, not at all. But we'll make that assumption. Okay. So now, what are the total number of outcomes? So, what are the total possibilities of n people having their birthdays?
365 to the power n.
Correct. Very good. Yes, Aditya is absolutely right. This is 365 to the n. Because every single person can have every single birthday. There are no leap years. Every year has 365 days. So there are 365 times 365 times 365 n times. So that's 365 to the n. Now, how many ways? So, what is the numerator? So we want no 2 to share the same birthday. So in particular, no 3 can share the same birthday, no 4 can share the same birthday, etc. So what's the number of ways no 2 share a birthday? How can that happen? So
365.
365 chosen.
no, that's 365 choose n. No. That will run into trouble because
365 factorial is 365 minus n factorial.
something like that. Yes. Right.
Also,
1 minus
so if n is greater than or equal to 365, if n is greater than 365, then the probability is 0. If it
No,
is,
that's wrong. Oh, who said that? Abhiram. No, that is wrong. It is possible for. Yeah. Sorry. Of course. That's correct. Yeah. Sorry, I confused myself. Yes, of course. By the pigeonhole principle, if if n is greater than 365, the probability is 0. Yes, but
and if n is between 0 and 365, then it's going to be 365 pn.
yeah. So I don't know what you mean by 365 pn. So let me just explain this. So the first person can have a birthday in 365 ways. Now the second person, so we'll go one at a time. So let's look at the first person. Order the people in any way you like. So the first person has 365 ways. The second person cannot have the way that the first person chose. So there are 364 possibilities. Third person has 363, etc. all the way up to 365 minus n plus 1. This many ways, right? And so the probability, let's say the probability, required probability is 365 by 365 times 364 by 365, etc. to 365 minus n plus 1 by 365. And I can write this as 1 times 1 minus 1 by 365, 1 minus 2 by 365, etc. 1 minus n minus 1 by 365. Okay, so what's the big paradox here? So, or this one I'll write as 1 minus 0. Okay, so what's the paradox? So fact, if you do this computation for n greater than or equal to 23, this probability will be less than half. So what does it mean? It means that if you have 23 or more people in a room, then with probability more than a half, two people are going to share a birthday. And the paradox comes from the fact that 23 is so much smaller than 365. You would have expected maybe that roughly 180 people should be there for this probability to be greater than half of sharing a birthday. And this is what messes people up. That if you have 23 people in a room, this is already very likely that they share a birthday. So let me show you an applet that my colleague has created. So let's say the number of people in this class, 100. 100 is roughly. So I'll choose random birthdays, and you see that there are many many repeats. So in fact, in your class, if everybody lists down their birth dates, I can almost guarantee, it's almost certain that there is going to be a repeat, even though, as I said, in practice, the birthdays are not equally likely. So even if I do 50, it's going to be extremely likely. And since I'm running out of time, so I'm repeating this experiment many times, and you see that there's almost certainly, so this is a very rare occurrence of no people sharing a birthday, but if you do this many times on this Professor Gadgil's website, you will see that the probability is very high. And with a class like 100, it's almost okay. Now since I'm running out of time, I won't give you the answer. Maybe you think about it, and in the next class I will tell you why. What's the resolution of this so-called paradox? There's no real paradox. It's just that people are stymied because this number 23 is so much less than 360. Okay.
So in the last line, should it be greater than or equal to?
Less than, right? So this number turns out to be less than half. Right? It keeps going down, right? So the probability of no two sharing the same birthday keeps going down. So the probability of some two sharing a birthday becomes higher than a half. Okay. So I think I'm out of time. So let me stop recording.